I'm starting off this little series, kind of mixing it in with my Woody project. Um, just a little bit of education and background. For the longest time, people keep saying that hybrids and all that's new technology. Well, the electric car was first invented in 1832. It's not a new technology. It was actually the first automobiles pretty much following steam in like 1790s. But electric really didn't catch on until the 1880s, 1870s, 1880s, and actually was easier to work on. So it grew in popularity. For one thing, it didn't put off the smoke and the steam. You didn't have to worry about the boiler exploding. The New York Cab Company, first vehicles that they had ordered were electric cabs. I don't know too much about the history of them. I haven't really looked into it, but that was one of the facts that I kind of dug into when I was looking this up. I always wanted to know what killed the electric car. Three factors came into play in killing the electric car. First of all, and probably the biggest part of the electric car, was its range was so much shorter than a gas or the steam powered car. Running on DC voltage batteries back then pretty much were just mason jars in your milk crate style batteries. They weren't very good. As far as being rechargeable, a lot of the batteries weren't rechargeable. Once they were kind of used up, they could not fully charge them again. So the quality of the batteries was very poor. The range was number one, batteries number two. Number three was 1915. Pretty much Tesla's idea of AC current was taking off and replacing a lot of the DC run homes in your larger cities, which really hurt the DC running car because you couldn't plug it in to recharge it. Back then the technology wasn't so good on inverters, or I'm not even too sure if there was inverters back in that period. I'm sure there was, but not something small enough that every house or building could have. So that kind of also was the death knell. But the reason why I'm showing you this video is the marketing campaign that really took off from the oil industry. People that were wealthy back then really started promoting racing, because that was the biggest selling point, was that power, that raw power and force. They didn't really want to show crashes or injuries because the cars back then really weren't capable of some of the speeds that they were doing, but they were very much capable of getting up to beyond 100 miles an hour. Pierce Arrows and Cadillacs of the day, and Auburns, those popular car companies back then that were really the top of the line, the Duesenbergs and Stanley Steamer. A lot of those cars were getting up near 100 miles an hour, which is not what somebody would really want. Most of the speed limits back then, when they started instituting speed limits, was only 10 or 15 miles an hour. But just like today, I mean, it was the power that was really selling it. I also read an awful lot of articles back in other books that spoke about it being electric car was the woman's car, where the man's car was that one that puffed the smoke. I think that house had to do with the American psyche and basically ending the electric car. But believe me, from what I've read lately from all the books, your electrical union was really pushing for electric car, but the battery was always its downfall. There was car companies that were getting 100 miles out of one charge and were doing good, but the market just was no longer there to support them. And if you look back at the time when most people were starting to get AC power in their houses and all that, kind of really phased out DC. So it's kind of a wash in what really killed the electric car in the beginning. I always known that, I mean, if you look at the motors, the weight of the motor, back then they used cast iron for that outer housing. Those motors were extremely heavy and not very powerful as they are today. Um, we've improved so much on batteries and power, and so much we have learned that there's no reason why we don't go to it today. Um, the idea I always had was to have half the batteries that they're talking about today and have a gas power, steam power, or otherwise motor to run at the optimal thing, not fluctuate like a car engine, but run at that optimal speed, turning a generator to regenerate those batteries. In doing that, you would never be broken down on the side of the road if the car could, you know, make its charge back up. So if you're just going to work, that motor would never run. But if you were taking a long trip or an emergency, you would have that generator on there to back you up to get you where you need to go.